Hi everyone, welcome to my channel where we all talk narcissism and codependency. Today I've decided to touch base with you regarding narcissistic sociopaths. And the reason that I've decided to do this is because many of you think that you're dealing with a narcissist, which you are, of course, but what some aren't aware of is that a lot of these characters that we've been Google searching about are actually sociopaths. And of course, if they're sociopaths, they're narcissistic. But that also doesn't mean that every narcissist will be a sociopath. It's all about the degree of narcissism that you're dealing with or the extremity of the scale. So we'll explore what they are, how to identify them, and the effects that they can have on those around them. So first of all, what is narcissistic sociopath? Narcissistic sociopaths are individuals who exhibit traits of both narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. And this means that they have an inflated sense of self-importance, a lack of empathy, and a disposition for a manipulative and harmful behavior. So while these traits can exist independently, just like I mentioned, a person can be a narcissist without being a sociopath, but it goes deeper down the rabbit hole. The combination creates an extremely toxic personality. So here are a few experiences from certain people who dealt with these types and how it affected them. And these are all fake names here. So Sarah meets Richard. He is the embodiment of charm. With his magnetic personality and sophisticated demeanor, he wins her over rather quickly. They tend to do that. He has a way of making her feel like she was the only person in the world who mattered. But beneath the surface, Richard had some darker tendencies. So as their relationship progressed, Sarah began to notice that there were some rather unsettling behaviors in him. He became increasingly controlling, demanding to know where she was at all times, and isolating her from her friends. He also had a tendency for explosive anger. So one night after Sarah expressed concerns about their relationship, Richard's charming mask came off. He became physically aggressive, threatening her in his fit of rage. Luckily, she fled the relationship unharmed, but the experience, it left her with deep psychological scars. She wants to date again, but she's on high alert all the time. She's afraid that the next man is also going to be abusive. This woman had spent 10 years with this man, 10 years of never being able to make her own decisions. Then there was Anna. Anna was attracted to Mark's intelligence and apparent emotional depth. He was an excellent listener, and he seemed to understand her like no one else. Anna is herself extremely intelligent, and she gets really bored with flat conversations. But when Mark came along and satisfied her intellect, well, she was sold. However, his genuine empathy was a facade. He was a master manipulator with a predatory nature. So he had used his supposedly caring demeanor to gain her trust and manipulate her into a dependent state. He, like they all do, eroded her self-esteem, making her feel worthless and reliant on his approval. She became trauma bonded, but she still had a curious mind. So when she began to question his behavior and seek help, his true nature showed up. He became increasingly erratic and controlling, using intimidation to keep her silent. And after a while, his behavior, it escalated even more. He started stalking her. Every time that her friends were over, he'd be right there, parked down the street watching. And this creepy behavior freaked out her friends, where they no longer wanted to come over, isolating her further. She eventually did leave, but the ordeal left her with CPTSD. And lastly, we have Julia. Julia was, she was attracted to Michael's success and sophistication. He was wealthy and generous. He showered her with gifts and attention. She felt privileged to be in such a high status relationship. However, his so-called generosity was a mask. He started to exploit her financially and manipulated her into supporting his lavish lifestyle. It turned out to be a facade. His so-called wealth came from poor, unsuspecting women that he had scammed. So when she started questioning his constant demands for money or access to her assets, his charming demeanor turned sinister. He became verbally abusive and threatening. So Julia's attempts to regain control were met with escalating threats and financial ruin and personal harm. He ended up owning half her home, where in the end she had to sell it to pay him off, along with paying off all kinds of debts that he had incurred. So each of these stories illustrates how a narcissistic sociopath's charming exterior can conceal dangerous behaviors, including physical aggression, manipulative tactics, and financial exploitation. And all cases required quite the ordeal to escape and to recover. Identifying a narcissistic sociopath can be challenging due to their manipulative nature. So here are some key signs that you can look for. So these include the grandiose sense of self-importance, chronic lack of empathy, exploitation of others. Watch for that one. They have no regard for other people. They have a pattern of deceitful behavior. Perhaps some of them have been in jail, have been in trouble with the law. They are antisocial. They take pleasure in manipulating others. It's a game for them. It makes them feel empowered. So now let's look at the narcissist alone. They too are self-serving. It's all about them. They are manipulative, but not for pleasure. Their manipulation is to get supply. They have a lack of empathy, but they can still feel shame even if they don't admit it. They are egotistical, aka grandiosity. They external reference. They're always needing to be admired by others. And I guess this goes with the grandiose. They have this exaggerated feeling of self-importance. So in a nutshell, if we're to look at differences, the sociopaths will maliciously manipulate, hurt, take from, and exploit another person purely for the satisfaction, whereas the narcissist's goals are about making them feel grand, important, and seen. So for those of you out there who are dealing with a narcissistic sociopath, we'll see patterns in both descriptions. And if you do, please do not underestimate the damage that they can do. These people can be dangerous, even if you're telling yourself that they've never laid a hand on you or showed any indication in any way that they could harm you in one way or another. These individuals often mask their true nature with charm and charisma, making their toxic traits harder to spot at first. They are charming yet pathological liars. Narcissistic sociopaths are often incredibly charming, using their charisma to win others over. However, this charm is a facade designed to manipulate and deceive. For instance, they might shower you with compliments and flattery to gain your trust, only to later exploit that trust for their own gain. Their lying is pathological. They lie frequently and convincingly, not just to cover up mistakes, but to create false narratives that serve their interests. This means that their stories are not just lies, but they're often crafted to control and influence others. They live in a made-up reality. These individuals often live in a distorted reality that they create for themselves. Their self-image and worldview are carefully constructed to fit their desires and needs. For example, they might perceive themselves as a misunderstood genius or a victim of a grand conspiracy. Is this ringing any bells for anybody? I knew one who was convinced that the helicopter flying above were CIA watching him because he was so informed about everything. Obsession with power and control. Narcissistic sociopaths are driven by an insatiable need for power and control. They might manipulate situations and people to assert dominance, often exploiting weaknesses to maintain their control. For example, in the workplace, they might undermine colleagues to ensure that Their own position remains unchallenged. In personal relationships, they could use emotional manipulation to control their partner's decisions and actions. Let's look at morals and ethics. Morality and ethics are foreign concepts to narcissistic sociopaths. They operate according to their own set of rules, which involves exploiting and manipulating others without regard for traditional moral standards. They'll borrow money from you, for example, with zero intention of paying you back. Or they'll create a huge lie about someone at work to get them demoted so that they can get the position. Their actions are dictated by their own needs and desires rather than any sense of right or wrong. And this allows them to justify unethical behavior as long as it serves their purposes. Limited access to emotions. These individuals have a shallow emotional landscape. While they may mimic emotions to manipulate others, they rarely experience deep or genuine feelings. Their emotional responses are often calculated and superficial. 99.9% of the time they are. The last narcissist in my life once came up to me. He put his face really close to mine and pointed at his eye and said, "Look, I'm crying." And there was this tiny, tiny little miniature tear there. I had no idea why he did that. Just bizarre behavior. They're so fake. Next, we have discarding people. Once someone is no longer useful or becomes a threat to their agenda, narcissistic sociopaths will discard them without a second thought. And this can involve abruptly ending relationships or jobs with no regard for the emotional impact on the other person. For example, a narcissistic sociopath might abruptly cut off a friend or employee who no longer serves their interests, leaving them confused and hurt. They are aggressive when threatened. When their control is challenged or their lies are exposed, narcissistic sociopaths can become extremely aggressive. And this aggression is a defense mechanism to protect their fragile self-image and maintain their power. Their responses can range from verbal outbursts to more severe forms of retaliation, demonstrating their intolerance for any threat to their control or status. Feeding off negative energy. Narcissistic sociopaths often thrive in environments filled with conflict and negativity. We call them vampires. They feed off all the chaos that they create, using it to distract from their own shortcomings and to manipulate others. For example, they might instigate arguments or drama to shift focus away from their own behavior or to maintain control over a situation. Lack of remorse. One of the most disturbing traits of narcissistic sociopaths is their complete lack of remorse for their actions. They may cause significant harm to others without feeling any guilt or regret. This absence of remorse allows them to continue their harmful behavior without moral or emotional restraint, making them particularly dangerous to those around them. You often think that you're safe, but think about it. No one who has ever killed or beaten ever thought that their partners would go that far. Otherwise, they would have left sooner. They often exhibit sadistic tendencies, getting pleasure from the suffering of others. Their manipulative and cruel behaviors are not just a means to an end, but also a source of personal gratification. For instance, they might enjoy seeing their targets stressed out or humiliated, and they use this pleasure to reinforce their sense of power and control. And I know many of you out there are feeling stuck. You're feeling afraid to leave, afraid that you won't make it on your own, afraid that no one will love you. You're trauma bonded. You've been programmed your whole life to believe that you didn't deserve more in life. But that's just it. It's programming. Programmed by caregivers, which led you to attract these characters in your life, who further solidified that programming. But the good news is that you can reprogram your mind to new beliefs. You can start by repeating the affirmation, "I am willing to change" by Louise Hayes. That affirmation, when repeated over and over again, of course with intention, can create some really interesting magic for you. Doors start to open. You could be led to the next book that you were supposed to read, or new realizations. And intention opens more doors to action. When the student is ready, the teacher will appear. For those who are willing to change and wanting some change in your life, you can start with this link that I've left down below for anyone interested that can help you kickstart a new path to healing. So on that note, I wish you all well. Take care of yourselves. Be courageous, be brave, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.